House of Joyce Leslie. If I could be anything, I would be a rich white girl, and I am almost halfway there. I straightened my hair before it rained. Now all I can do is pray. I don't mean that figuratively. I'm living in this logocentrism. Where did I get these Spanish thighs? I was crying in the food court because I'm afraid of the spiritual anorexia that I crave. I wrote out a prayer in repertorial style like a good Protestant. Obsessed with achieving the androgyny of my time, I cut when my boyfriend said I had the figure of an average Hispanic girl, so what was I so upset about? I decided to try liposuction at home. So much splendor is owed to dysmorphia and a fucked perspective, like those Gothic spires poking heaven that someone just thought up, like, can we tap this broomstick on ethereal marble floors, or what can we really do?
As far as a guy goes, looks-wise, I don't know. I just like guys who dress nice. It's 35 tokens for a boob flash.
I'm at home alone crying, and somehow it doesn't feel right that no one knows it. My impulse to Instagram myself crying, mascara tears streaking my face, if heated, would land me in a community of overwhelmingly female internet emoters. And were I to simply hashtag sad girls, I would be connecting with not just people of my gender, but a legitimate online category developed out of a complex social reality, a combination of material and imaginary, that ushers women, young and old, away from the oppressive surveillance apparatuses of late capitalist patriarchy and into the comforting glow of their devices, where they are visible and voiced on their own terms, and yet, ironically, more surveilled than ever, as the NSA tracks credit card purchases and reads emails linking data to create millions of data identities for U.S. citizens. The internet is not a safe place. It's laden with trolls, police, bigots, canon protectors, grammar shamers, elitists, all emboldened by anonymity and groupthink. These are its wonderful pitfalls. However, we're not deterred. There are endless possibilities for response. At the risk of sounding utopic, no one's going to lock us out of the classroom or the Congress of the internet. At home crying on a Saturday night because I'm conflicted about a rift between two poetry communities, one that's given itself permission to unmoor its practices from the historical body politic, thus freeing itself from ethical accountability, and another that's rightfully angry, demanding from the other community renunciation and restorative action for harm done by the group's leaders, by using aggressive social media shaming to call out the poetics for its elitism. I'm in a radical rut thinking about where protest and resistance can be located in the ambivalent position I inhabit. I always find myself here, especially when identity politics are a part of the question. There has to be a way to protest without dissolving contradictions. Donna Haraway wrote, "Blasphemy is not apostasy. Irony is about contradictions that do not resolve into larger wholes, even dialectically, about the tension of holding incompatible things together because both or all are necessary and true. Irony is about humor and serious play." As artists, we're wary of neat positions, which are the building blocks of ideology. At the same time, most of us are activists. To be an activist requires ethics and a certain amount of ideological cohesion, even when it's revolutionary. As a cyborg artist, my cybernetic and organic blasphemy within the feminist humanist revolution is revolutionary. The poet and performer Jennifer Tamayo recently told me that for now she's happy to fan the flames of a rage that she believes is transformative. I think my position in the New York City literary scene, as it exists lately, has been one of radical boredom. A boredom I think it might be interesting to articulate and perform as a call for transformation. My radical boredom is my blasphemy. I yawn when people talk about how brave and risky it is to be a poet. I want to sleep through these rituals based on old academic forums that we call readings. Appropriated, uncreative works allow me to fully relish in my boredom, as boredom is an expected and desired reaction to this kind of work. When people talk about how special it is to be a poet, I don't really get it. The one exception to my year of radical boredom is when in the fall of 2014, we poets gathered together out of an urgent need to talk about protecting our communities from sexual predators and countering pervasive misogyny in our culture. It was the most important thing we'd come together to do, and the event itself had nothing to do with poetry. I'll return later to the ways in which this boredom might be articulated as a form of protest against the preciousness of predominantly white, male, overeducated poetics. But first I want to talk about the way the current reality of government surveillance has disrupted the cyborg feminist future imagined by Haraway to describe the position of the female artist and her device. The humor and serious play that defines Haraway's irony inspired what I'm calling this radically bored reverse cam girl video performance. Contrary to the flattened way women often appear online in ads and higher production porn, the cam girl is looking at you, hoping to establish a dialogue. It's eerie. When I'm watching porn and she pops up, I close the window, afraid that she can see me. Another reason she's a bit confrontational and scary is that the mechanism through which she appears can infect you with spam, exposing you to the worst our culture has to offer: antidepressants, Viagra, penis enhancement, weight loss drugs. She's stuck in this room in front of her camera for hours. It's a bit like fixating on a fish's eye as it swims around a tank. She looks incredibly bored, imprisoned there inside her room and inside her body. In Caroline Merchant's The Death of Nature, she challenges the socially progressive nature of scientific rationalism, worrying that the shift from an organic to a mechanical paradigm would legitimize the exploitation of women in nature. But here the cam girl is both mechanical and organic. Like Haraway's cyborg, she is a creature of social reality as well as a creature of fiction. The agent of a programmed narrative of seduction, she can't help but look extremely bored as she jostles the camera and negotiates with her invisible customers. I like that her boredom is documented and embodied. There's something incredibly honest about boredom. It isn't like rage, which can turn into violence. Boredom rarely has a trajectory, except perhaps to burrow deeper within. I try to think of an exception to this theory I formed, and quickly think of one that shatters it, for which I'm so thankful. Daisies, the 1966 film directed by Vera Chytilova, demonstrates boredom at its most baroque. Disenfranchised and rendered inert by the warring, patronizing culture they live in, the two women characters let their apathy run amok. Aimless, the Maries eat cake and guzzle beer and affect arbitrary emotions for sugar daddies. In the famous opening scene, they move like dolls and are penned in by a narrow camera frame. One gets the same feeling as when watching a cam girl at work. Their bodies are sources of identities as well as prisons. They manipulate their screwy limbs to adjust a flower crown or tie a scarf. You see artists do this, and I'm not making a value judgment, when their product is unstable, as it should be. They manipulate symbols and accoutrements to create an equally unstable personal myth. In the character's active performance of boredom, there is a hyper-awareness of the sterility to which they've been rendered by a highly surveillant government, and they reify that sterility through more and more extravagant, frivolous but flaccid behaviors. I'm reminded of a time I was reading for a Brooklyn series and couldn't stop yawning as all the white roster of poets took their turn standing up behind the mic and somberly reading their poems. My partner asked me to stop yawning. He said, "Have you ever seen what someone looks like when they yawn?" That was okay. I wanted my boredom to be ugly and ostentatious. As an artist and activist operating with a dual online and offline consciousness, I am surveilling and surveilled. A few years ago, a male photographer took a picture of me lounging on a blow-up couch wearing a crop top on a hot summer day at the New York Poetry Festival. When news of its publication in the New York Daily News went online, feminist poets objected to our bodies, claiming they undermined our work. It felt like we were being accused of being complicit in this photographer's scheme to use our bodies to sell our art. But don't poems come from bodies, we ask? Do we not work every day in our writing to dismantle the patriarchal apparatus that would have us be invisible and austere behind our work? Poetry is not so precious as to preclude us from using our bodies in play with the semiotics of femininity to challenge notions of what it means to be a serious female artist. I'm allowed to fuck up, to be titillating, to be untasteful, to be flippant, and still be taken seriously. I'm allowed to wear sweatpants and be taken seriously. I dare you to try not to take me seriously. To return to the sad girl genre for a moment, music writer Lindsay Zolad said in an article for Pitchfork about early Rilo Kiley and the latest Lana Del Rey that until recently, describing sadness in detail has mostly been beneficial for sad boys, with the absent girl as the mute pivot point for their brooding. But now, publicly articulating sadness is defiant in a mystifying discourse that insists that women have won equality via the only path that matters, economic gain. I feel weary, disillusioned, and defeated in my sadness. I want to disappear, but I also want to be seen. Well, it's actually more that I can't help but be seen because I'm a girl, and an awareness of being seen is inextricable from even the most private sadness. Pretty when I cry. So if I'm going to be a girl, if I'm going to be surveilled, in the words of sad girl extraordinaire Lana Del Rey, let me put on a show for you, Daddy. I'm bad at being a part of a group, I'm lazy and unpracticed at community activism, I admit. Lately, my body has been objecting to the two communities that have recently had adversarial public relations, for vastly different reasons. And my heart and my mind wants to know, where is the community for the in-between way I'm feeling? Who else is bored? A ridiculous question made possible by the access to collective feeling granted by the internet. For some time now, we have debated issues and organized activist groups as cyborgs. The exciting promise of cyborg activism, as I mentioned before, has been complicated by increased surveillance, as Haraway warned it would. And I've noticed that we, as a community of artists, have internalized the surveillance in ways that are both productive and unproductive. For example, as we push for progress and keep tabs on which reading series are broadening their reading and opening up their spaces to more writers of color and which ones aren't, we monitor each other as we track the progress of our canon exploding agenda. Infighting, ruptures, lonely nights at home are part of a growing process, I hope. My boredom, I hope, is a part of that too. The word mongrel hails me as a half-breed and an artist who only feels at home in hybridity and indissoluble contradictions. I'm a half-Latina woman who enjoys every white privilege one can hope to enjoy, including the privilege of being able to perform and write about race without being essentialized or tokenized. I know avant-garde writers of color have been subsumed by the more visible and powerful clubs. I acknowledge that I need to read more and then find a productive place for my indignation. Though the condemnation of the ultra-academic conceptual poetry faction that the Mongrel Coalition has dubbed Greenpo doesn't sit quite right either. The work of this movement's consideration of language surfaces has led me into a deep critique of contemporary culture that my education lacked. But as a writer of economically disadvantaged origins, it would be a strange home for me. I love and respect the writers of color who are using conceptual techniques to create and perform in ways that I quite frankly believe keep literature relevant. And I would feel strange cajoling them to renounce a movement that has felt like family to them. Who am I to tell someone they are colonized? And yet I am someone who can say that. So here I am feeling called by the rhetoric of both sides, as I imagine many people are as well. Though I'm so grateful for the flames and the voices that flame them, the redundancy of the fights and worse, the apathy of conservative writers, the silent, monochrome backdrop to these nuanced debates, who are content with the way things are, mostly precious, disembodied, monoglossic. My ambivalence prevents me from taking a specific oppositional position for now. Radical boredom, however, opposes art making that thinks it's special for the sake of being itself, that dismisses other methods of art making and divergent content off to a ghetto named feminist poetry or alt-lit or selfie art, etc. that mystifies its own means of production and intentions. I'll conclude by saying that work by women that is confrontational, even in its boredom and sadness, can disrupt the white male default we have to navigate mostly offline. I'm glad there are too many women artists to name who are performing publicly and convulsively and angling the camera to look where she wants you to look. The cam girl exchanges her body and the story of her body for an abstract currency that later becomes real money. The girl artist types into her laptop or looks into her device and both wittingly and unwittingly starts a new dialogue that later becomes real change. I think the cam girl, though I admire her for many reasons, is a cautionary tale. When what we're producing and consuming is stale, we feel the boredom of being imprisoned in rooms and bodies. When the efficacy of our work refuses outmoded forms of interrogation by those who don't want to be made uncomfortable by our embodied I, then we're free to walk out of readings, walk out of parties, rejoin communities, reject communities, protest, and yawn, unimpeded by the expectation that we have a great time while we're out there being taken seriously. Yawn.